I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector News Podcast. And I'm joined by a longtime friend, Joe Kizis, who is the president of Equity Metals. Welcome, Joe. We're live on location at the roundup put on by the Association of Mineral Exploration in BC.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Appreciate it again.
it's kind of novel. We're in the same room looking at each
I
other.
know, that's right. We usually do it over a screen.
Yeah. So this is quite good. Um, Before we get too far off on this discussion, for the people that aren't familiar with equity metals, let's tell them what equity metals is all about.
Yeah, we're a relatively um, small group. We're part of the Mannix group of companies, so our focus is usually on exploration. So we were contacted back in 2019 from a group that was struggling, and their board asked us if we'd take a look, see if this was something we thought we could build the resource. They had a resource at that time that hadn't been made public, but it was completed, and it was around 400,000 ounces gold equivalent. I tend to look at equivalency in respect to gold, but it's polymetallic deposit. So we took a look at it, did our due diligence, and we felt like there were a few areas, two primarily, that we thought we could verify the existing resource and expand upon it, which we did. And we started drilling in 2020. We drilled over 100 holes, and we came out with a brand new resource update at that time. It was over 1 million ounces gold equivalent. That was kind of our minimum target to justify, a longer term program of additional exploration.
Wonderful. And let's go back to the history of that previous deposit and how you got your hands on it, and let's bring ourselves up to January of last year.
Yeah. So like I said, we did some geologic kind of background work, and we started drilling off areas that we thought were extensions of the mineralization. We were correct. We had reinterpreted one of the areas where they did not have very good continuity, and we discovered that they were probably drilling in the wrong direction. It's not well exposed, so it's not a criticism, but as we started looking at the data in a couple of different ways, we had an indication that instead of being north-northwest, the veins were actually east-west. And that fit the model better. We drilled 3 holes to test that idea. I think it was the end of 2021, and all 3 holes hit high-grade silver. And so, from that point, then we started drilling out the veins in the correct orientation, and they filled out pretty well. So our resource then was completed at the end of 2022, put that information out, and, we pretty much justified our program. Now, it was interesting because when you look at the cost of going from that 400,000 ounces to the 1 million ounce gold equivalent, it was very, very cost effective. Our finding cost, if you want to call it that, was about 15 cents an ounce of silver that we added to the resource. Or if you'd like to think about it as gold equivalent, it was about $11 an ounce, I think it was. So very cost effective exploration.
I was going to say that's pretty cheap gold at $11 an ounce.
Yeah. The deposit still has to get bigger, right? Because, you want the economy at scale. We think this is what we'd call an intermediate sulfidation epithermal system. Basically, this is what happens on the top of a porphyry system. You get these fluids coming off and filling up these fracture zones with sometimes very high levels of precious metals, with base metals as well. So, that was our focus, is to look at some of the other veins. There were about 20 veins that were identified on this property. And basically, we drilled out on maybe 4 of them. And so we did some drilling during 2023, which was kind of a transition year for us. We did have some infill drilling that we still did early in the year. And then we transitioned into 2 of these other vein zones that we think are parallel to some of our known structures. And we drilled those holes primarily pretty wide space, not to build resources, just to verify that the model is such that we should be able to build a resource in these areas pretty quickly. And so we were pretty excited, particularly in what's called the George Lake vein, because there has been quite a bit of historic work on the project. There wasn't very much historic mining, a very small amount. but there was a significant amount of pre-production work. So they did a lot of underground development. That's all flooded now, but they did a lot of work, including continuing on one of the declines into the George Lake area. So if we can build a resource there, we'd have access to that. And that's one of the problems with underground mining is to get enough working faces that you can feed a mill at enough tons per day to make, to get the advantages of size, right? The amount of throughput. So we're pretty excited about that. We did a financing late last year. Flow through, we raised $1.6 million, a little bit more than that. So we have the funding for the follow-up work that we're going to begin. Probably open up the camp in May and, continue after that. With our drilling, we'll focus primarily on the gold or the George Lake deposit. And then we also have some plans on some of the other targets as well. Coal Lake was pretty interesting too. We did hit some mineralization. It wasn't as strong. We don't have the underground access, that's flooded, but potentially available if you dewater the plant. So we're pretty excited for the coming year, as well as pretty proud of what we did in the past years.
Yeah. Now, you started to make a transition away from the Silver Queen to these new
Well,
projects. What led to that?
it's the same project. It's still part of the Silver Queen project.
Okay.
But that part of the Silver Queen, we focused on the western portion of it, where two of the veins had been, one of the veins had been fairly well delineated, and that's where the 400,000 ounces of the 2019 resource was. There has been quite a bit of drilling on what's called the camp zone, which is a couple of kilometers away to the west. And they had assumed that it was one direction that was similar to the number 3, but turns out it's almost 90 degrees difference from that. But once we figured that out, we were able to connect up the mineralization there. And that's one of the reasons we were able to quickly add ounces, back in for the last few years, really.
Perfect. Now, the drill program you have planned for 2024 that's going to start in May, what is it that you hope to discover and find from the results of that drilling? What are you're looking to confirm, or
Well, we're
are you
trying to
hoping to find?
expand. Yeah, we're trying to expand. Basically, we drilled close to where some historic drilling was, in part to verify the holes that were there, and they verified pretty well. And then we stepped off with two or three holes. One direction, not so much. The other direction looked pretty attractive. We hit some pretty thick zones of some pretty nice mineralization. It's only 2 holes, right? So in a lot of these types of systems, there's a top to the system and a bottom to the system, and usually it's the sweet zone in between. That's 200 to 300 meters from top to bottom. So it's wide open basically. So we have about somewhere between 400 and 600 meters of strike length where we know there's some mineralization, and we think we can fill that in with resource. That would be the idea anyway, with fairly tight drill spacing to bring it to at least the inferred category.
And how long before you think you get to a revised resource on that?
Well, whether, it's expensive to do a resource update, so we'll have to see what the results are, whether it's justified just on that vein, because that vein should continue on past where we expect to drill. So, if we hit some thicker zones than we kind of anticipate, much higher grade, we might get to the point. Right now, we'd like to see about at least maybe a 40% increase in what we think is going to be the resource upgrade before we do another update to the resource, because you have to do that with an independent group. It's expensive and time consuming.
It does, and everything else kind of stops while you wait.
Right.
So
Yeah.
no, that's quite understandable.
Mhm.
So the drill program that we're looking forward has been funded, and it's going to be ready to roll.
That's right.
If people want to follow the results of the drill program and the company's progress, how would they do so?
Yeah, well, you can follow our website, equitymetals.com, and our trading symbol is EQTY, equity .V. So you can follow us on on the charts as well.
Yes, I like your chart symbol. It's like my old team coaches used to say, there's no I in team, and your chart symbol says there's no I in equity.
Right.
Thanks very much for joining me, Joe, and I look forward to seeing results as they roll out this year.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Equity Metals is a paid sponsor of the Prospector News. The host owns shares bought at the market for investment purposes. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.